All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming here to what is probably a dark, cool underground space. And tonight, as most of you know, we want to talk about transition to employment, particularly for graduates, in order for us to better connect with you and for us to give you, as you have either finished the course, an architecture course, or heading towards finishing, to help improve your experience and to give you an idea of what's happening in the employment market in the present. I would firstly like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded land on which we work, learn and live, the Wurundjeri, Wurrung and Bunurong peoples. We recognise their unique place held by these First Nations peoples as the original owners and custodians of the lands and waterways across this continent, with histories of continuous connection dating back more than 60,000 years. We also acknowledge their enduring cultural practices and caring for country. We pay respect to elders past, present and future, and acknowledge the importance of Indigenous knowledge in the Academy. So we have two panels tonight. Panel one will be talking about the mechanics of preparing portfolios, preparing CVs, how to approach employers. And the second panel session will be more about strategies and crafting your career and how you might do that, what kind of pathway would you take. And we don't expect that everyone who comes to the second session may necessarily want to be an architect in the traditional sense of the word. So to kick off the first panel, we have the wonderful Emma Gibson and Charlotte Poulain, and you're going to give us a bit of a talk about CVs and what you expect to see. And then following that, we'll have a panel with Thihoa Gill from Grimshaw and Alan Ting from Wardle Studio will come and join us on the panel for Q&A style and general questions. So I'll hand it over to Emma and Charlotte. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Peter. So I'm Emma, this is my colleague Charlotte, and as Peter mentioned, we're from Bespoke Careers. So we're a recruitment agency that specialises in the design industry. We've actually presented at the Uni of Melbourne a few times before, so it's nice to be back and to kind of chat a bit about the transition to employment with you guys. So things we're going to talk about today is a little bit more about Bespoke and our team. We're going to look at the current market at the moment and what practices are kind of looking for. We'll also touch on salaries and go through sort of CV, portfolio and interview tips. And then we'll kind of finish off by looking at sort of immersing yourself in the markets and how we can help at Bespoke. And then I guess at the end, we'll be joining the panel and answering any questions you might have.
So Bespoke Careers was established in 2004 in London originally. We've got offices in Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, New York, London, LA and Austin. So if you're looking for opportunities in either of those states or cities, then hit us up because we can certainly help with that. All of our employees are from an architecture and design background. So as an example, I'm a registered architect. We interview all candidates before putting them forward for roles, and this is mostly done in person. And we can also test you on your Revit skill set and other software.
So we source sort of permanent and contracting talent, and I actually focus on the kind of contract and temporary desk at Bespoke. We look at candidates from sort of that entry level, so those who just come from masters, all the way through to sort of senior strategic appointments. So we recruit for architecture, which is what me and Charlotte look after, but we also look at interior design, business supports, product, BIM, so BIM managers, BIM coordinators, senior candidates as well as landscape and urban designers. So a little bit about myself. So I studied my master's in architecture back in the UK. If you can't tell, I'm from the UK. I'm from Manchester originally. I moved over to Melbourne back in 2019. I'd worked in practice for a few years across the commercial and residential sectors. Yeah, fancied a bit of a change and yeah, now work at Bespoke as a senior consultant. I've been here for 3 years and I focus on contract as well as landscape architects.
So my name is Charlotte. I joined Bespoke over a couple of years ago now, and I'm a senior consultant also working within the architectural space across permanent roles. I'm also a registered architect, as I mentioned, and I've worked across the high-end single residential space as well as education, commercial, aged care and heritage sectors, both in Melbourne and Adelaide. I guess what's great about studying architecture is that it also opens up other avenues outside of architecture, so such as project management, interior design, graphic design, BIM, design management and landscape architecture as well. So the current market, so generally there's peaks and troughs when it comes to hiring throughout the year. The start of the financial year and around the holiday periods are usually the busiest times for candidates looking for a new role. The markets across Australia can differ depending state to state, but generally in Melbourne at the moment, there's always a high demand for project architects with a strong Revit skill set. Growth across health and multi-residential sectors, including social housing and build to rent. Practices are becoming more aware of working towards an equal gender split and diversity, and firms are also encouraging staff to work within the office at least 4 days a week, more so 5. Typically across the board in Victoria, in terms of software, we would say about 75% of the practices use Revit, and then 20 to 25% use ArchiCAD, and a small percentage, about 5%, use AutoCAD and Vectorworks.
So salaries. So this is an example from our 2023 salary guide. This is our sort of base salaries exclusive of superannuation. We've kind of gone off the architecture awards, but also the market and what we see. This is what kind of we've collated this sort of data together. Touching on the award rate, so currently graduates who are entry level, just come out of masters, are looking for a minimum of about $60,625. There'll be sort of new award rates released in July this year. It's interesting to see with our salary guides, you have to kind of consider, I guess, practice sizes. So we're looking at, salaries from one-man bands all the way through to international practices. Typically, we find the larger practices pay higher than those sort of boutique sort of practices. Again, with salaries, we suggest to be realistic about salary expectations and be prepared to start at the bottom and work your way up. I would also kind of advise to consider, I guess, contracting as an alternative option just to kind of get your foot in the door. So that could be a sort of 6-month contract. Again, it could go to a permanent position after that. And on a contracting basis, you'd be working on an hourly rate. But yeah, I think it's really important to learn about kind of salaries and packages on offer. And it's also really good to, after that sort of 6-month probation period, that's the time to kind of negotiate salaries. But at the same time, a lot of practices have annual salaries every 12 months. And again, it's a good time to kind of negotiate there.
So CV tips. So we always suggest keeping it clean, well organised, easy to read and concise. A lot of practices typically like to see a minimalist style CV with a lot of white space. Stay on brand graphically, so graphic hierarchy and graphic consistency is important, such as the same font. Keep it in order, so put your career summary in chronological order from most to least recent, and also date it with years and months you have completed your time there. So that's important with education and degrees. Be relevant, so only describe relevant experience and responsibilities you've had. This could be relating to sectors that the practice works across, as well as relating to the job advert requirements. Make it concise, so limit the CV to at least 1 A4 page, and also accompany the CV with a personalised cover letter that can definitely support your application. And we always suggest as well, less is more. So this is just a brief example of a minimalist styled CV. So we've got the education listed in reverse chronological order, and then the employment months and years have been listed. It's great to note down your software or your technical expertise. This can also be shown graphically as an example, colouring in circles as to how proficient you are in the software. Again, keep it to a 1-page format. This could be included within your portfolio itself or as a separate document. Clear font is important. With employment experience, list again in reverse chronological order, listing dates from most recent to least, and a white background, so clear font, and be sure to check for any spelling errors. So that's very important.
So the portfolio, so this is a good way to kind of show your design presentation skills. We suggest to really show your style and try and be unique, as again, you'll be up against peers, so it's good to kind of stand out in the crowd. It's important as well to use kind of mixed media. We want to see kind of documentation skills as well as sort of sketches, but also kind of those hero images, some nice renders you might have done as well. As Charlotte mentioned in the CV, it's similar with portfolio. We tend to say keep it quite light and use quite a lot of white space, maybe use white or light backgrounds for your portfolio. It's also really important with regards to size of sort of portfolio as well. I mean, we see hundreds of portfolios, so I think 100-page portfolios might be a bit excessive. We would suggest perhaps around that sort of 20-page. Pick your most notable projects, and as well try and keep it under 10 megabytes as well. It's also really important just to kind of keep your portfolio quite relevant to the company that you're applying for. So make sure you kind of highlight those projects that are relevant. For instance, if you are applying to, say, a boutique residential practice, it's important to kind of highlight those projects you might have worked on or designed. And also, it's really important if you have worked in practice at all, even in undergrad experience, we suggest to kind of show your portfolio, your professional work first in your portfolio, and then show your academic work after that. And then finally, just make sure it's a PDF version. We find it quite complicated to navigate online, like portfolios on a website. And again, in an interview, a client might want to kind of print that off as well. So it's important to have PDF. So this is an example of a portfolio page we like to see. So again, you've got that mix of sort of documentation, but also kind of the hero images there, some nice renders. We also suggest to add a little bit of text in there. So these could just be sort of bullet points, just to kind of show, kind of project phases you might have worked on or the kind of design input you've had on that. As well, it might be good to kind of note awards and publications relevant to the projects. And as well, if you have worked in practice, it's good to maybe just to note down the clients and again, kind of, the kind of budget of the project as well. We also like this kind of page as an example. Again, it shows quite a lot of white space and that kind of important sort of project details included. Again, not too sort of wordy there. And also we do love to see sketches, particularly for graduates. I think it's great, a really nice touch, and a lot of sort of practices like to see that. So again, it's got a good mix of media there.
So interview tips. So always research the practice, the projects that they've completed and are working on, as well as the people. So who you'll be meeting with in the interview. That can be found on the website or on LinkedIn. Turn up on time, know where you're going and how to get there, and or if it's online, have your link at the ready with all your prepared documents and your computer ready to go. Bring along a detailed portfolio and any supporting sketches or technical documentation packages you wish to share. This could be either hard copy or on a laptop or an iPad. And always just dress appropriately.
We also suggest maintain eye contact and be enthusiastic. It's really important sort of having really sort of positive body language in the interview. Also be clear on your strengths and areas you'd like to progress in. We try not to suggest to be negative and kind of discuss all the kind of gaps in your experience. I think it's important for practices to know that you're willing to learn and really kind of wanting to progress in your career. Also prepare questions to ask the practice. What do you want to know about them? It's just as important for them to sell themselves to you as well. And again, as mentioned with salaries, just be prepared with your salary expectations to kind of match sort of market rates. Again, Bespoke can help negotiate that. And then finally, practice the pitch. So we suggest like a day or two before the interview, just maybe practice in front of family or friends.
Immersing yourself in the market. So always keep up to date with what's going on. This can be done by social media or LinkedIn. Attend industry events, both in person and virtually. You'll never know who you'll meet or what sort of opportunities around the corner. Imagine and Sona are also great student and graduate networks that host events. Networking is key, so one conversation can always open up a range of new opportunities as well.
Again, we suggest sort of use social media to your advantage, really connect with sort of key industry figures and keep your LinkedIn page up to date. Just from our experience, LinkedIn success usually comes from consistency. So I would suggest, really sort of posting quite a lot about maybe events you might have gone to or projects you admire, and, comment and like maybe, again, practices or, key, figures that you kind of aspire to. Be mindful though when it comes to social media, and just be aware of the potential employees are looking at your page. So I'd say just keep that pretty PG. And then finally, follow follow practices, again, sort of architects as well as sort of magazine sites, just to keep up to date with current projects and what's ongoing. Because again, if there's a new project, typically they're probably going to be hiring as well.
So new graduates are encouraged to approach practices directly. Having some professional undergrad experience during your studies can be highly desirable and get your foot in the door in the practice. We can secure a role for graduates with minimum 2 years local postgrad experience within the industry.
We also host a regular CV and portfolio sessions where our consultants provide sort of guidance on your documentation. And we also have resources on our website, again, for sort of further tips on those, and also just a range of videos from our What Employers Want series.
Bespoke also offer a refer a friend incentive scheme. So you'll receive a $400 Westfield or Chadstone voucher if you're able to refer a friend and we're able to place them in a role.
So yeah, thanks for listening. And again, if you've got any questions, we're going to join the panel. So thanks.
Thank you so much. That's very informative. Right, now we'll get Charlotte and Emma, if you can come to the seats, and then we'll also get Thihoa from Grimshaw, who's studio manager at Grimshaw, correct? Yes. And the amazing Alan Ting, who is actually a neighbour of mine, and he's an associate principal of Wardle, which is probably why I shouldn't say this, I don't see him so much because he's always working in other places. But come and grab a seat and we'll get moving with a discussion. These seats are very high, and I mean, it's a pretty good view of and comprehensive view of things, but I don't know. I thought maybe Thihoa and Alan, do you want to add anything to that? I think one thing I was wondering is portfolios.
Firstly, I want to say thank you for that presentation. I'm a little bit like, I better brush up my own skill set. But, don't be daunted by that, because if you're just starting out, this is all just about learning. So it's really valuable information, and you'll have your own identity and your own way of doing things. But I think those tips are really helpful. I mean, I'm old-fashioned. I printed out some notes here because of technology, but just wanted to talk about, I guess I'm the people and culture lead at Grimshaw, and I can see a couple of familiar faces here. So, correct me if I'm wrong. But so all the CVs end up on my desk. So I review them and things like that. So I can talk to you about the process end, and I think it's some of what you're saying about the fluctuation in industries. A lot of it's about timing as well. It's not necessarily your CV or application. It's simply about if there are positions available or what sort of breadth there is to review the CVs. At the moment, I think, Alan, you're from large practice as well. So we probably speak from a large practice perspective, but, I probably receive about 53 to 60 resumes a week through our kind of expressions of interest email. And unfortunately, I guess systems are systems, and they do spit out a kind of a very dry response. So I think practices need to be better at how they engage with applications, because everyone's individual, and we get an overwhelming amount, so we can't do that all the time. And I do apologise if anyone has sent anything through. But I guess in terms of the folio, I've written just a couple of notes here that might help the conversation. But I think the first thing is, I think you mentioned that, your folio, your website is your folio, your Twitter feed is your folio, your Instagram is your portfolio, CV is your portfolio. So it's really important to keep that social media, I guess, how you want to represent yourself. And because that's important, because we do dig into some of that. but not background checks, but just to have a look at what you're engaged with, what sort of design, how it sort of relates to your portfolio, what interests you have. Perhaps I'm not quite sure if this is true, but maybe treat your application a bit like a competition, you know, in a way that you're putting your best foot forward in terms of your folio. Show your best work. And I think even some details on presentation, because that's important. I think the other thing is show your process, not just all the hero images, but we want to see how you got there. We want to see how you think, how you storytell. You know, that's part of the kind of experience as well. Yours should be really graphically savvy. So, you know, that should read across your folio and CV anyway, and your website. Make it accessible, as Charlotte Emma mentioned. Online CVs are fine, but you don't want to make the person reviewing them do all the work. So you want to be really concise. So I think you mentioned a PDF and then something to print out. It sounds old-fashioned, but sometimes I go into meetings with printed out CVs because often the senior leadership team are older and they can't read portfolios online. But it's just another way of just remembering if you're sending things through, or if you're putting a certain sort of resolution of an image, you've got to think about how that translates if someone prints that out or forwards it on. Sorry, I've lost my voice. I've been in so many meetings today, so I do apologise. The other thing is, yeah, show who you are. You know, don't be afraid about that. You know, your formal education is your formal education, but what you do outside that is also important because it builds you as a person and your interests. So if you show that, photos of what you might do, you might play football, whatever you might, like, you know, going to clay school, whatever it is, or pottery, show some images, but make sure they're kind of graphically represented too within your portfolio. And, you know, I probably disagree slightly with one of your points, but show your vulnerability. That's okay, because what they want to know is you want to learn, you know, you're eager, and that's okay. So you can't do everything. And, you know, as graduates, you know, you can't be expected to. The other thing is, and I think you mentioned that is, am I going on too much?
No, keep going.
You know, get networking. It's not just for a job, you know, it's to gain industry insights, get some feedback, like use your peers as your own crits, you know, it's really important. And I know you've mentioned a couple of good networking things. There's also Poulain. Not quite sure if many of you are aware of Poulain. It's Genuine Equity. But they put some really good presentations on with leaders of, leaders of the industry, a diverse crowd as well. And it's really good to engage in those conversations and discourse around it and stay positive. As I said, it can be really difficult. And I think somewhere like Grimshaw, we obviously have a dedicated people and culture team, so we can manage sometimes volume or responses or extend, you know, just a connection. So, you know, just, stay positive. You will get there. And,
Right. And I think I do want to just add one point to what you've said, Thihoa, is if you've got experiences outside of architecture, some kind of leadership experience, even if you've worked in retail or restaurants in some positions of responsibility, I think all of those things are good things to put into your CV because it tells a potential employer that you have taken responsibility or you've had particular leadership experiences leading sporting teams or in clubs or whatever here. So I think that is an important thing to include. Now, Alan, how many do you see in your office? 50, 60, hundreds, or what sort of happens?
To be absolutely honest, the inbox would have over 100 CVs come through regularly, and we would not even get to look through all of them. The context of hiring, you can imagine for us, we hit a busy period and we need to find some extra staff, talent, help, and we would look to that inbox to sort of see who stands out. But to be honest, the longer term hires come through a series of communities, and I think that's the point I want to make. Before I get into that though, show of hands, who's actually worked in practice before? A few of you. That's good. That's really good. I imagine that's through your year out.
In 1852. Sorry.
Well, it's great to see because like that foot in the door starts to expand this idea of a community. And I think architectural practice is so broad. It's like life. It's like it can take you wherever you want. And you need to find what you're interested in and what type of practice. There are big commercial practices. There are big design practices. There are young practices. There are rubbish practices. Like you need to find your own what you're interested in and then seek that out because that's the only way you'll sustain your career and find joy in that. So, for example, I don't want to bring too many stories, but when my first job was at 6 Degrees as a year out student, and I really wanted to work there. I think because I drank at their bar, and I just loved that carpet on the wall. And I heard a story through a friend who'd been there as a student a few years before, and he'd applied by writing a love letter on the toilet paper because their office at that stage was inside a place called the Public Office, which was a nightclub after hours, but their office during the day. So he snuck in and put his CV on the toilet paper. And that got him the job, and that gave me some ideas. But I didn't quite go that far. But I did seek them out, and had some conversations, and eventually did get a job there. And that opened up a world of a specific Melbourne architectural community that led me on to other places. So I think just as these guys have mentioned, that's super important, but follow what you're interested in.
And to some extent, it is engaging with that community and engaging with some of because now we have many different organisations or, that people can join and network through, as we've mentioned, Sona and Imagine, Architects Declare, I should mention ACAN Australia, and of course Parlour. And it's, there's always something going on during the week.
Yeah.
I work in a very big firm for interview, but they kind of feels like my portfolio is too graphical, and they say, we love your work, but it's just too graphical in a way, and you didn't actually present your design pretty well, and I'm quite depressed at the time to hear that, to be honest, because that's the first time I went to an interview and I'm quite confident back to the day. And I was struggling saying if I put because I did a little bit of Illustrator and also graphic design for wedding company as well. So I put some of these works in my portfolio, and I was really struggling. Should I put this work on because it's not really architecture, but I did stick with what I thought I should do or this is what I'm good at. I'm not gonna give it up. And I went to the other firm, and they loved my work. And yeah, it's like, oh, I know it's a bit, it's quite graphical, and my work is not quite commercial renders. It's more like cartoon kind of style, more Japanese style. And they like some of our, because they do small residential building, and they like some of the client, they actually prefer this style. So you never know. Like, you never know what you put in the portfolio if that's gonna be work or not. I mean, maybe for some firm they love it, for the other they not. It's not about who you are or what you produce. It's just a different style. It's just different firm, and they have their own way to pursue architecture. That it just, so don't put it too personal. If you have the same situation as what I had, it can happen.
I think those are good comments. Don't take it too personal, but if you are rejected or people say architects will say anything about portfolio, but it does raise the issue, and I think Emma and Charlotte, you picked up on this a bit, like putting in other graphical material, like if you're a photographer or something, I don't know, that might help give an employer an insight into the range of things that you can do and also what you like doing and interested in doing, thereby the employer can then work out whether or not you're actually a good fit for that particular firm. I think it's about providing potential employers with information.
She put in that she does yoga in her CV, and she ended up being like the yoga wellbeing person in the office, which was great. And again, it was a really good conversation starter for the interview. Yeah, and it's funny. I was just thinking back to my experience. I know when I first got my first job as Part 1 in the UK, so my undergrad experience. I actually had, I did a dissertation on restaurant design, and I actually wrote about McDonald's restaurants, and I actually got my first job working for new build McDonald's through my dissertation. So it's really crazy how the smallest detail in your CV can get you this and do some different jobs. So, yeah.
At this stage of your career, I just want to reiterate that drawing is so important, and it's our medium. And there's old-fashioned drawing with a pen, but there's new things like AI and digital modeling and new mediums. Just embrace it, learn it, and master it as much as you can, because they're the things that start to stand out. And of course, there's baseline things like Revit, software skills, but at the end of the day, you need to express your ideas as an architect, and drawing is the most important medium.
And model making would be another thing, wouldn't it? Yeah. So I guess drawing, you mean like sketches and that sort of thing. But I think when you start to think about, I mean, the panel might want to talk about this before we go to questions, the range of things that you want to put in, you've got to curate that. I think you've got to edit it. You've got to make sure that, that person, obviously the yoga person, probably didn't put in 10 photos of them doing yoga, or, a whole lot of sketches or a whole lot of wedding cards. Like, there needs to be an element of curation, and it needs to be, simple. Keep it simple, because I think we've all seen portfolios and CVs that are just completely plastered with fonts, graphics, and it's like, I'm a designer and I just want to show you everything through everything that I do, what a designer I am, different, I mean, you've all seen those, haven't you?
From RMIT.
RMIT, oh my God, there could be RMIT people here.
Joking.
I don't know if you want to add any more to that comment. Okay. Alan, do you want to say anything else? And then we'll...
I suppose when you do start to get out there, keep track of your progress, know what you want to learn, and have a think about how you'll get that knowledge, or what you need to do to find it, and start to plot that progress, because next year will be year one of hopefully a very long career, and write them down. I still do it. Like, what are the wins? Where are the losses? Hopefully not too many. And what can you do to sort of help yourself grow?
All right, let's have some questions. Do we have any questions? Yes.
Sorry. I'll just give you that.
So just say you get, what you said, 60 or 100 emails a week, portfolio, resume, all that. What do you look at first, the resume or the portfolio?
There's sort of a 10-second glance at both to shortlist.
Yeah.
But to that point, I think the cold email, I don't think it's the best way. Find the contact, find the individual, potentially use these two. But you got to make that connection, because if you're one of 60 emails, it's very hard.
To be serendipitous as well. I mean, I think it's really, as I said, we've got a massive system at work. So, it's go through, resumes per day. We've got a global and positive tribute. It does take someone to sort through it and look through it. Often I have a glance through. Sorry.
I have to have a quick glance through to see if there's anything that could shift, I guess, the sort of strategy around hiring. So there might be any positions that you might find someone with particularly good follow that might shift some of that direction. A lot of it's to do with timing. I mean, I agree with you, Alan, in terms of this industry is a lot of networking. It's a lot of, if you've got a tutor that might be practicing full-time or part-time, and you get some connections through them or something. It is particular. I mean, it's complex, and it's, I wish it was more straightforward, but a lot of it is about networking. And we try and remove, I guess we're all going through sort of reflections in our companies about how to remove bias from applications and applying, and how to make sure there's, there's equity and fairness around hiring practices. And I don't think we've got that down pat across the industry. So I think, some people come to the practice through directions like which school you went to sometimes, and I don't necessarily think that's fair. So we try and get from a hiring point of view, a cross range of resumes and experiences to then try and make it more equitable. But in terms of standing out through a sort of sometimes you just don't, because it's just volume. And that's just, I just want to be really honest with you. And, some of our responses from the system are really dry. And I, roll my eyes at it myself because I think we can do better. But, they're terrible and they don't connect. And for us hiring, sorry, Bespoke, but for us hiring, about building those relationships with applicants is really important, with the good ones and the good folios, because you develop, relationships with them. And then when you're hiring, you know who to go to. So it works for us, just as equally as from both sides. But yeah, I mean, Alan, I think you responded to that. I kind of agree with you around that. And that's kind of necessarily complex.
I once gave a job to a person who turned up in the office at 8 a.m. and said, "Hey, here's my CV." So I said, "Oh, okay, I'll look at it." And because it was physical, I then looked at it and I thought, this person's actually bothered to go into the front door.
We get quite a few walk-ins.
And how does that work? Is it effective, you think, or is it just like, oh, here's another walk-in?
Often I'm called up. If I've got the time, I'll meet with them. Yeah, 10.
When we receive CVs and portfolios. Again, I guess particularly for graduates, we obviously look at the sort of graphical style, but I'm always drawn as well just to, I guess, their like software skills. We want to see, I guess, obviously, ideally sort of strong Revit, maybe Rhino, Grasshopper. Again, looking at those kind of renders that you might have done. What else would you suggest, Sud?
So if you were to do a walk-in to a practice or bring in a hard copy folio to an interview, I would strongly suggest having it beautifully curated. So get crafty with it. Create the front and back cover out of leather or something. Just make it stand out, because a lot of practices and architects in general, we love anything unique.
Might be good to touch on, obviously, cover letters as well. Obviously, CV portfolios, and we do get a lot of cover letters. I mean, as recruiters, we are the cover letters when we chat to practices. But it'd be interesting to see guys' opinions on, I guess, cover letters. What do you guys think?
I agree, they're very important. And I think that like I was just saying earlier, the generic ones that you've downloaded from somewhere and filled it out just don't sit well. That they need to, if it's a specific job you've seen, they need to talk to that, and you need to make an attempt to understand the culture of a practice or what they're on about, to just immediately feel it, make the person reading it, me or Thihoa or whoever, feel at ease that you should be there. Because if it's too generic, it just doesn't make sense. And
I would assume too long is not good.
Oh, yes. Nice and succinct.
You don't necessarily want to hear someone's whole life story in the cover letter, I would have thought.
To yourself, because you'll pick out things that you might read just reading off the screen.
Directors, practice manager, or people on culture manager know their names. You can just find that out on the website, LinkedIn, because it just adds another layer of
Any other question? Oh, there's one here.
Hello. My question is in regards to the current state of the industry. Speaking from experience hunting for work at the moment, I've noticed that there aren't so many roles for recent graduates. And the reason I'm bringing this up is just as a highlight for the other graduates maybe in this room that will have been hunting for a while and haven't been able to find something. So what are your thoughts about the current state of the industry?
I think, Alan, you graduated into the GFC, didn't you, or just
I
after?
yeah, I finished. When did I finish uni, Peter? 2008. I think 2009 was my first year.
2009 GFC.
I think I was a good student. Was I a good student?
Yes,
I
exceptional.
I had plans to travel to London, had my visas organised. My sister was already there the following year, and she said, "Don't even bother." And I had several jobs in Melbourne, potential jobs in Melbourne halfway through the year. By the new year, they were all gone. I found myself working in a bar for a while, and at some point on the dole. But I think in August that year, I did find my first graduate job. So look, stay positive.
And I think use that time to network.
Yeah.
And I've known people who've, done that, and eventually, sometimes it takes 6 months, but they eventually then get a job. And I think the thing that people should remember is architecture is subject to economic cycles. In a way, it is a boom bust industry. And Alan's right, it was booming just before the GFC. Everyone had jobs. Everyone could go to London or to the Mideast and get a job. But it all changed like within a month. All the money dried up and everything went pear-shaped. So I don't know what if you want to add to that about boom bust or getting yourself through the tough times.
There's certainly peaks and troughs throughout the market, and that'll continue to happen. So you just have to ride with it. It's a bit like a roller coaster, unfortunately. I guess when I completed uni, I was able to secure a job at a practice that I had completed an internship at throughout my study. So it's great to have those connections. But then when I relocated from Adelaide to Melbourne, it was very difficult finding a job. I'd applied to, nearly 70 practices and just didn't have any luck for a long while until one company gave me the chance, and I remained, loyal to them for over 4 years. So don't lose hope. I know it's hard. I've been there. Just try and stay positive and build on your connections and your networking, and just keep reaching out to different practices and try to make your profiles stand out as well. And maybe like if you're not working currently, try and upskill yourself in other areas. Like if you haven't learnt Revit, now's a great time to learn Revit. And
Yep, good time to upskill. Yeah. Any more questions?
I'll just quickly say, Peter, I mean, we've all talked about recessions, and I'm old enough to have gone through a few, but the fluctuation industry, at the moment are, up and down all the time. And it is particularly difficult for practices. I mean, I sit in kind of project forecasting meetings quite regularly. So we're also trying to balance, the situation that's happening currently in Victoria, and Victoria being broke. But yeah, don't be disheartened. Keep positive. I know it can be really tough, but at the same time, it is an opportunity to upskill. I know we all have to be paid. I know we have to earn a living. So, maybe we can scaffold that with other work. But it is really important to stay positive, because you will get through it.
And to get your foot in the door somewhere. So even, it could be a slightly different role. Yeah, like could be a sort of a drafty, could be a project coordinator. You go in the landscape space just to get your foot in the door there and see what happens really. Yeah, 3 to 6 months, for instance. Yeah, definitely, because it's all about timing. Yeah.
Any more questions? Right. I was a contractor for a while. I did a lot of contracts because no one would employ me. But the thing about that was I got a lot of amazing experiences. And I think that was really valuable for me at the end of the day, because contracting does give you diverse experience, and you might not get that experience if you're just in one place doing one thing for a while.
I work with so many contractors in the industry, and these might be candidates that have typically done permanent roles and gone into contracting, particularly when the market's quiet. But also I work with contractors who have done it for years and years, and they love it. They go from 6 months at one practice, 6 months at another, and it's very project based. So you get a lot of exposure and experience across so many sectors and really diversify your portfolio. So it's a really good way of doing it, and there's lots of benefits to contracting for sure.
Now, I think I've got one more question. Like, you get an interview. I think you touched on it. And I think my rule of thumb is if you get an interview, they think you can do the job. Do you think that's true or not? Or is it like, I don't know. Yeah.
If anything, you've got nothing to lose. Just give it your best shot. They are already really interested in your profile. So just try and represent yourself the best way you can and talk through all your experiences very clearly and concise, and talk through some past projects as well. And you'll have it in the bag. So I think often more interview experience, the better. And you only get better from here on in as well.
And always good to rehearse, I would have thought, with friends and family, and that really...
Out loud as well.
Yes, and that really horrible uncle who hates architects, always good to reverse with them.
I remember those interviewing you are also learning from you too. Yeah. So, it's a two-way process, I think. The more... Sorry,
Sorry, I went to K-Box the other night, so I'm probably holding the microphone like that. Remember, an interview is a two-way process, so the interviewers are learning from you. I always come out of those interviews with something different. We also try and have a diverse range of people interviewing, so you get a also cross perspective of the studio and the role, if there is a role available that you're absolutely interviewing for. And I'll bring the gender and equity. We try and have male and female in there as well, because I think that's an important part of you going into your role and transition to employment around about equity. I think I'll keep banging on about that.
I'd always say in an interview, just one of my tips, I get very nervous in interviews. I always find it's good to have a glass of water by your side. If you are, on the spot, and get asked a question on the spot, it's good just to take a second, maybe just take a sip of water and just have a little think before you answer. I think that's always a good way. But again, I think my biggest tip is just be authentic and be yourself, and just ask as many questions as possible. I think it's really important that you've done your research, but also they should be selling to you as well. So yeah.
I think also it might be silly, but it's important to say always just make eye contact, because we often meet with candidates to have internal interviews within our office, and the amount of time candidates aren't the best at presenting, it's quite it's quite interesting. So always make eye contact, not too creepily, but and smile as well. Demonstrate your positive and friendly nature, and also just demonstrate your enthusiasm for the role. And ask questions like Emma said.
All right, one question down the back, and we'll make this the last question because...
I guess my question, just out of interest, I know we say early career, your first job, just get whatever you can get a hold of, or try as many different places as you can. But would you agree that those first jobs actually do make a huge impact in the rest of your career? Or would you agree that, because we say every experience counts, but how much do you think this shapes the future of your career, of where you actually go, especially in terms of small practice, large practice?
I'll start with the microphone. I suppose I'd say have an open mind, but be guided by the experience you're learning, but then reflect on that. And if it's something you're still interested in, go for it. If it's certainly not what you want, then change and move. Yeah, because careers are funny, aren't they? You kind of have to give them attention to shape them, but some of it's up to destiny too. So just be aware and reflect, and seek out the experiences to know what you want to do.
And I think that's a good lead into the next panel, is about what is your career strategy and pathway. And of course, and this was probably the dilemma I faced, if you just take whatever jobs that you get, where is the strategy in that? And sometimes you do have to say, sorry, I want to go and do this. Sorry, I want to leverage my skills into another field, as I'm sure Charlotte and Emma have leveraged their skills into recruiting. You know, I think it's something that you do consider over time, but I don't know. Yeah.
We're kind of perfect example, Charlotte, of I guess quite big career changes. You know, working in practice for a few years, did really enjoy it, but I think it kind of led me to realise I really like working with people and having I prefer the kind of overview of the industry. So yeah, it was a big change, and I guess, yeah, I've never looked back, but I've been here for 3 years now, and hopefully we'll stay in recruitment for the long term. So it's funny how it does, yeah, kind of lead to completely different avenues. I always thought, you know, doing my master's in architecture, I was always going to be an architect. And a lot of my friends have done that, but a lot have gone into different industries. And yeah, I guess we're quite unique.
And I think be guided by your interests as well. So, you know, if you're interested in a particular sector of work, like single residential, for example, explore that avenue and explore smaller practices that work on those projects. And also be open-minded. If you're, I guess, in your first couple of years or so, you've had more so front-end exposure. So that's working on the concept design of projects. Be aware that, you know, when it comes to registration, you'll need an all-rounder skill set. So you'll need also the front end as well as experience documenting projects and I guess running on site as well. So within the contract admin stage. So just keep reviewing your progress to date. And then if you feel as though that you're not seeking that sort of experience at one practice, then perhaps that's a good opportunity to voice your concerns to the senior team members. And if it's not possible, then just look at other avenues as well.
The first couple of years, you know, career trajectory isn't linear necessarily, and there are kind of milestones, I guess, in the ministry and
like that, and senior project architect or whatever that structure may be. But I reckon for the first 2 years, you know, get uncomfortable in what you do as well, because that will challenge you and you'll grow from there. Work with a diverse range of people. I mean, be deliberate in some of the choices you make, but I think it's really important as a graduate that you don't fixate on something, because that will limit you, broaden your resource opportunity as well. And, you know, hopefully you'll have good mentors where you practice, and so they'll be able to help guide you as well. But yeah, roll your sleeves up, have fun while you do it.
Seek out those mentors. You can have a chat and try and understand this big idea of practice to help to get some advice. Yeah.
And I think in those membership organisations, you will find informal mentors, not necessarily ones in your practice. Now, we have to, I think I'm very strict on the time. So I think we'll leave it there. I mean, we could talk about this endlessly, but I think we will be back for the next panel, which will talk a bit more about strategic career advice. And I think we're going to do it again sometime. You guys are welcome so much to come back again. And we're hoping to do a similar session either later in the year or the same time next year, maybe later in the year. So I think a big round of applause, and thank you so much to our panel. Thihoa, Emma, Charlotte.